I want to talk about these readings this week. Both the New Testament reading and the Gospel reading. Interesting readings. You know how when the Americans elect a new president, and there's a focus on their first 100 days, and that 100 days is used as some sort of an indicator of what the term is going to be like, or what the priorities are going to be, and that sort of thing. Well, this gospel reading today, we're still in the first chapter of the Gospel of Mark. And the Gospel of Mark, especially that first chapter, could be seen kind of like one of those 100 days. Everything that is going to then unfold in the rest of the Gospel of Mark is indicated in that very first chapter. Jesus has been born. He's been baptized by John. John has been arrested. Jesus has been, after being baptized, has gone out in the wilderness. He's come back. He's gone to the synagogue. There's so much in that first chapter of Mark. And so today's story has this story about a healing of Simon's mother-in-law who has a fever. And a lot of folks these days struggle with miracle stories in the gospel text, or healing stories like this one. I don't know. I think that if you're one of those folks who struggle with these readings, keep in mind the words of, I think it was Marcus Borg, the New Testament scholar, who one time said, of miracle stories and that, I don't know if it happened exactly like this, but I know the story is true. And so I think it's important for folks who struggle with these stories to differentiate between fact and truth. This story, there's some great truth in this story. And for us, I think it's a more beneficial thing with miracle stories and healing stories, and instead of getting all caught up or in conversations with, say, your family members or friends who are not Christian, instead of getting all caught up in the nitty gritty of, well, did it really happen exactly like this, and all of that stuff. It's so much more beneficial, and it's so much more enriching to instead dig a little and say, well, what's in this story for us? What's in this text for us? Because these texts have changed people's lives dramatically over a 2,000-year period of history. And look at what's come out of that 2,000 years of Christian history. So it's more beneficial to dig into the story and say, what's in it for us? Just as an aside, by the way, with this particular story, there have been several archaeological digs in Capernaum, and there has been I think it's a first century synagogue has been excavated there, and underneath the foundations or the ruins of this first century synagogue is an older synagogue that this one was built on top of. And so the older one, quite likely the one where Jesus actually spoke that day. What makes it even more interesting is that very near to there are foundations of an ancient house. The legend is that is Simon Peter's house. And again, people can say, oh, the Crusaders just made all that stuff up. But in this case, this house from very early on in the 2nd century, this one particular house was treated very differently from other houses in Capernaum. And then eventually, once Christianity was no longer illegal, a church, sort of, a gathering place of some sort, was built over this house, and it evolved over the years. And there's Christian graffiti found in the plastering and things. So there's just, I don't know, kind of interesting when the archaeology connects like that. But back to these texts and what's in this story for us. Well, first of all, I absolutely believe that we still see people who are, let's say, possessed by demons, or demons that still ruin people's lives. Just we call them by a different name these days. Those demons can maybe be popularity, prestige, low self-esteem, seeking for more and more power. There are all sorts of demons that still ruin people's lives, and it seems to me that the Christian message and the Christian community are the people, we Christians are the people who really can help free people from those demons and the ruin that those demons cause in people's lives. We free people through our unconditional love, acceptance, by including people. So a couple of things with respect to that with this reading. Did you notice that once Simon Peter's mother, when she's with fever, she's isolated, she's set apart from the community. And when she is healed, then she's brought back into the fold, brought back into the family, into the community. And how does she use the gift of this healing? She uses it in service of others. She immediately gets up and goes right to work, serving others. Paul, then, in this reading we had this week, he expands that idea of how we serve others and what others do we serve. Sort of like that question in the New Testament text, the gospel stories about who is my neighbor. Paul sort of grapples with that, and he talks about this changeability. And some people, well, so many people come down hard on Paul anyway, but I think, we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Sure, Paul here and there said the occasional odd thing, but they all have to be taken into context. And so Paul, he talks about this, changeability, that we sacrifice everything for the sake of the gospel and bringing other people to Christ. And there is so much in that, because it is about saying to we Christians these days, all through our history, but I think it's a particular message for us these days. It tells us to be flexible, open-minded, to be adaptable to context, to the people we meet, and if you think about that open-mindedness, that flexibility, that increasing within us a capacity for adaptability. Think just about, for instance, our political situation these days. Canada, the US, UK, Italy, France, Belgium, Netherlands, all around the world. The Canadian government just the other day issued another 13 different groups, I guess, that are now on declared to be terrorist or domestic terrorist organizations and that. And I understand that, and I want to be so careful. I understand that. But I really have never believed that legislating actually solves the problem, that we need to engage with people and converse with people and discuss with people. A few weeks ago, I talked about how it is a different thing to approach people who perhaps their political views we find objectionable, or views with which we don't agree. It is a different thing to engage people in conversation and say, what's all the anger about? What's all the hurt about? And I'm just not convinced that legislation, it doesn't solve the problems. We Christians can be agents for healing and light in so many of the problems that are going on in the world. And the longer I live, the more I get involved with, the more things I see, the more and more convinced I become that Christianity really does have the answer to a lot of our world's ills, that so much in our world could be made better if the teachings of Jesus were actually put into practice and followed seriously and unwaveringly in a more widespread and consistent and regular way. So there's a lot in these readings for us, a lot for us to think about, both internally in terms of, what within me needs Jesus's healing light in healing touch. What within me, what are those areas? Maybe my attitudes, my beliefs, my assumptions about others, assumptions about myself. What within me needs Jesus's healing? And then how are we going to use that healing in service of others, but serving others with tremendous flexibility, openness, open-mindedness, unconditional love? That should be and is the hallmark of the Christian community. Amen.